Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Brexit Clinic. My name is Henrietta Brealey. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Relationships at the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce, and I'm going to be your host for today. Before I introduce you to our fantastic guest experts, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Chamber, who we are and what we do. So many of you will be aware of this already, but for those less in the loop, we are a not-for-profit business membership and business support organisation. And we've been in business for business since 1813. So as a fun fact for you, fittingly for today's discussion, one of the reasons we were founded by the business owners of Birmingham was because of their concern about disrupted access to European markets as a result of the Napoleonic Wars. So times have changed, but some sort of discussions do tend to come back round again. Today's chamber is all about helping connect, support and grow local businesses. We've got around 100 members of staff, and we help businesses with absolutely everything from finding customers locally to trading internationally. When it comes to Brexit, we've been spending quite a lot of time over the last few years helping keep businesses informed and ready as possible for the changes to come. A lot of you may be wondering, what is actually going on at the moment? We're just 32 days to the end of the Brexit transition period. The EU and UK, the deadline for agreeing an extension to negotiations passed back in the summer. So we know that we're going to be leaving at the end of this transition period on the 31st of December. The UK and EU are still locked in negotiations. They're ongoing this week. We're expecting confirmation of deal or no deal any day now. But the most important thing to remember for this discussion is that we are going to be leaving at the Customs Union and Single Market on the 11 p.m. on the 31st of December. So a lot of what we'll be discussing today will be relevant for your businesses to be aware of and prepared for, regardless of what comes out of a deal or no deal decision. On that note, we're continuing to provide a fair amount of support for businesses in the run-up to the end of the Brexit transition period and beyond. You can find out more at greaterbirminghamchambers.com/Brexit. As part of this, we've teamed up with the West Midlands Combined Authority and our neighbouring Chambers of Commerce to offer a range of free support and resources. We've been delivering a range of totally free training courses, normally worth about £250 plus VAT per head, on the international trade aspects of Brexit. We've got another one coming up on the 9th of December on customs procedures and documentation. So if your business is a significant importer and exporter and you're going to be responsible for these within your organisation, it's well worth putting a few extra people on these training courses to make sure that they're as prepared as possible for the changes to come. We've also got a range of webinar recordings. This is the 7th in our latest series of webinars, but we've got the previous 6 recorded up on our website on everything from the UK internal market bill to the EU settlement scheme and more. We've also recently published a range of Brexit checklists, which offer sort of essential guidance on steps for all businesses to take on key areas related to Brexit, and also information on what's changing across a number of different key areas, where to go for more information directly relevant to your business, and also the other support that's out there from local organisations and nationally as well. Last but by no means least, we're running a free customs support helpline where our colleagues in our international trade documentation team are on hand to answer any questions you may have about customs post-Brexit. The number's up there, 0121 468 0831. But that's enough about us. On to today's discussion. So I'm really pleased to be joined here today by Cerys, Tim and Andy. Cerys is a partner at leading law firm Pinsent Masons, also a chamber patron, and she specialises in intellectual property, information technology and information law. She's going to be focusing primarily today on data protection. Tim is an export development and international trade advisor at Strong & Hurd LLP and is responsible for delivering training to a wide variety of organisations, particularly at the moment around Brexit. And he's going to be focusing on moving goods across the UK-EU border. And last but by no means least, we've got Andy. Andy is a VAT director with over 27 years experience, chamber patron RSM, who focuses on advising corporate, internationally focused clients with complex supply chains to ensure that VAT compliance requirements are identified and they are fully prepared for changes coming around VAT. He's going to be focusing today on delivering services in the EU, but also will be able to answer questions around VAT, given his previous expertise. The way today is going to run is each of our guest speakers is going to do a quick 5-minute presentation, just highlighting those key areas businesses need to be aware of, steps they can take to prepare, before we break out into the main part of today, which is our discussion sessions. As a delegate, you will see something pop up asking you if you're happy to be put into a breakout group. When that happens, click yes, and you'll be randomly assigned to a group with a number of other delegates. And every 20 minutes, a different speaker will be dropped into your group for an open discussion about their subject area. Please do feel free to ask questions directly relevant to your organisation. Please do treat anything that you hear in these discussions from other businesses as confidential. And of course, this will hopefully be a useful opportunity for you not just to learn from our guest experts, but also each other on how other businesses in the area are approaching these complex preparations. We'll then reconvene back in the main room, as it were, for a final wrap up before finishing promptly at 1:30. If you have any technical difficulties at all during this, if you find that your internet goes down and you fall out of the discussion group, just pop a comment in the chat and my colleague Grace will be on hand to help. Now, that's more than enough from me this morning. I'm going to hand over to Cerys first to talk to you about data protection and the end of the Brexit transition period. Over to you, Cerys.
Thank you very much, Henrietta, and good morning, everybody. First technical issues to try and share my screen, so I'll give that a go. Fantastic. So yeah, it sounds quite scary, 1 month to go, and it's really felt like a countdown process to the end of the year. One of the areas that I deal with is around processing personal data. And certainly this has been one that has been highlighted as an area of complexity since the start of the Brexit discussions, and it has been on the agenda throughout. So I would say now that it's still possible that a deal later this week may bring some kind of smoothing over of the issues that I'm going to talk about. But I must say we've expected that many times and it hasn't happened yet. So what do we need to be concerned about? So I've just highlighted on this one slide the areas that we need to be thinking about. So first of all, lots of people are saying, well, do we need to even think about the GDPR? Well, we do. The thing that will change is that we will have the UK GDPR as from January. So that will be what applies in the UK. Although it will be different from a legislative perspective, it is essentially the same standard as we've all been used to. So all of the good work that you've put in over the last few years to ensure compliance around GDPR is still very valid. So that's the good news. We will also have a concept of EU GDPR that we need to be aware of. So what that means is if, in fact, you're processing the data of EU citizens in the UK, the effect of EU GDPR is you'd still need to comply with that. So at the moment, given that the two are essentially the same because they come from the same legislation, it has little or no impact, but you do need to be aware that it is strictly a different regime. And as time goes by, that may start to differ. We also then need to think about what is the key issue in terms of the divide that we will have between the EU and the UK. And that's principally around data transfers. So the principles of the EU have been in the same way as many other aspects. There's been freedom of movement of data, essentially. So whilst you've had to comply with all of the GDPR principles, the principle that said you couldn't transfer data related to outside of the EEA, so you could transfer freely within. That will now change. So as from January, we will become a territory that is a third country and outside of the EEA. Behind these slides, I have far more detailed slides that we can share with people, but I think it's best to keep to the structure on this slide for now. So what does that mean? As a third country, we have this difficulty in transferring data. So what do we have to look to? Well, if you're transferring data from the UK to Europe, everything remains the same in that you still need your controller to controller or your controller to processor arrangements, but you don't need any other measure to deal with the fact that you're transferring it across borders. So that direction of travel is fine. The problem arises with transfers coming from the rest of Europe into the UK because Europe is not treating us as being part of the EEA. Naturally, we won't be. We're therefore treated as a third country, and therefore currently there's a prohibition on that transfer unless you have a particular measure in place. So what measures could be put in place? Well, the one that we all hope for is an adequacy arrangement, whereby the European Union would decide that we had adequate laws because we have GDPR, and therefore we would be able to re-engage the free flow. But that isn't automatic, and it's likely to take 18 months to 2 years to actually put in place. So we have a break in the meantime where we have to think about something else to put in place to ensure those transfers. So if you are in a situation where you're transferring data from Europe into the UK, and remember, you know, that can be, you see it as a transfer from the UK to a company in Europe, but actually they're going to transfer data back again. That will be a transfer from Europe to the UK, and that's where you need a measure in place. So the usual measure is the standard contractual clauses, unless you can rely on a limited number of derogations that are pretty narrow. That's what you're going to need to have in place. There are some additional issues around standard contractual clauses. Some of you may have heard about the Schrems decision. So it does mean that you need to understand the flows that are taking place. You need to understand the encryption that's being put in place, the privacy requirements around those flows. So a lot of identification, working out practically how it's happening, the security measures in place, and then the contract is absolutely key to make sure that those are legal transfers, or you could have the entity in Europe refusing to provide the data through to you. The other thing you need to be thinking about is your privacy policies and statements, because those also need to spell out that these data flows will happen and that you're now complying with GDPR in the UK. There are other issues that are too many to talk about here in terms of appointing a European representative and also thinking about your relationship with the regulators in Europe now that we won't have what's been described as a one-stop shop where the ICO could represent you in terms of any discussions with regulators. Why is it important? Well, the fines are very hefty and there can actually be fines now both from the ICO and other regulators. And the key thing is making sure reputationally that this is done in the right way, so that your customers, your suppliers, all of the others that you're dealing with in Europe have the confidence to be able to supply data through to you. So that's my summary of all of the things that we need to be thinking about. But I'm sure we can take questions in the breakout sessions and talk about it in more detail then.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cerys, for somehow managing to be quite comprehensive and incredibly quick on talking through the main issues and changes there. Tim, over to you on moving goods across the UK-EU border.
Thank you very much. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Whichever it is, not quite sure which we are now. I'm not going to use a presentation, which at least makes my life a little bit easier. So I'm just going to sum up the situation. My name is Tim Hiscock. I'm an export development and international trade advisor at Strong & Hurd. Strong & Hurd is a Manchester-based export and import training and consultancy company. We work with a lot of companies, especially in the physical movement of goods. We work with exporters, importers, freight companies, and many other companies as well. We're busy helping companies to prepare for Brexit at this time. Now, what we're about to see in 32 days, as Henrietta reminded us, is really the biggest change in international trade that any of us have ever seen in our careers, and it's going to happen suddenly at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December. It's going to be huge, it's going to be sudden, and every business will be affected differently. Some things will be important to some businesses, some things will be important to other businesses. Now, most of these changes will come into place immediately from the 31st of December at 11 p.m. We need to be ready for that to come in. And also, while we're all waiting to hear whether we get a free trade agreement with the European Union, we need to understand that most of these changes will happen whether we get a free trade agreement or not. There are still many businesses thinking that a free trade agreement might leave things more or less as they are now. That is not going to happen. There are a lot of things we have to have in place. A lot of changes are going to affect our business. How do we know? A lot, it depends on the goods that we're moving, the nature of the goods, who our customers are, whether we're importing or exporting, whether we're re-importing goods, processing goods. A lot depends on our individual situation, and every company's situation is different. All I can say at this stage is time is short. We have 32 days. Everybody needs to look at the impact, understand the way that Brexit is going to impact their business, plan for how you can mitigate for that. And then the really, really important part now, which I think is so important now, is communicate it. I always think of exporting of goods as like a relay race. There are other people involved in the race. We need to be in tune with them. We need to be communicating with them. And when we're exporting goods or importing goods, we need good communication with our freight company, with our the end user, with any other intermediaries in that line. Everybody needs to know what they're doing. And what we need to do now is communicate with our customers and our suppliers. Many companies across the European Union may not have prepared for Brexit at all, may not have realised that Brexit is going to affect the trade relationship that we have with them. We need to be able to go to these companies as a matter of urgency, explain the change in the situation, what it means, and have our solution, tell them how we propose that we're going to do this. We need to lead through this situation if we're going to thrive in the post-Brexit world. So don't delay. If you haven't done it already, put the actions into place. If you don't know, if you're not sure what the implications are on your business, then ask. There's a lot of support available. Henrietta's explained the support available to you in the West Midlands. Find out, work out what your plan is going to be, and then communicate it and work with everybody in your supply chain, your customers, your suppliers, your freight companies, anybody else you're relying on to get the job done. Time is of the essence. Don't delay. And I'll shut up now, but I'll look forward to your questions when we're in the separate groups.
Good call to action there, Tim, that we should be cracking on with Brexit preparations if we aren't already, and remembering that customers and suppliers may not be as prepared as even your business is. Right, last but by no means least, Andy, over to you on delivering services in the EU and possibly touching on a bit around VAT as well.
Yeah, thanks, Henrietta. Let me share my screen as well. Okay, hopefully you can see my slide. Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm here to share a few insights on the impact of Brexit on the services sector. It's fair to say, and I think as just following on from what Tim was saying, that Brexit is taking up most of my waking hours currently, and if the truth be known, a few of my sleeping hours as well, I'm sad to say. We always knew that VAT and indirect tax would be the biggest impact, but that's actually principally on the movement of goods and the impact on supply chains, and many of the calls to action that Tim has mentioned, I would reiterate. It's fair to say that we've heard relatively little about the impact of Brexit on the services sector. And in fact, in recent days, and again this morning, we're hearing more about the impact of fishing and the importance of that to the as holding up any deal. When in actual fact, fishing is a tiny part of the UK economy. But you know, I'm not in any way diminishing its importance, you know, for the communities involved. But it just indicates how little impact and importance that the service sector has actually taken in this. So this looks like quite a busy slide, but some really indicative numbers here which indicate the importance to the UK economy of the service sector, which, you know, we think is largely unrepresented in the Brexit discussions that have been you know, reported widely. In the UK, it's a service sector economy, a broad church of different services, from technology right through to financial services. And you know, we've seen at an early stage the UK really keen to support the strength of the UK financial services sector. So our trade surplus is in the service sector in 2019, 12.4 billion trade surplus with the EU, 10.6 billion with the US, and 31.86 billion with the rest of the world. You can see the service sector in the UK employs just short of 2.8 million people in 600,000 businesses, actually with an average staff count of 4. And when you think that includes all the big professional service sectors, you know, RSM and the big 4 accountancy firms and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of businesses whose impact are potentially going to be need to be considered. As a percentage of GDP, 7.75%. But the interesting thing here, 1/3 of it is in London, and we've heard a lot about the importance to the London economy, but actually 2/3 of it are in the regions, including our region here. Key issue for the service sector, and it's picking up, I think, on points that Cerys was making around the key founding principles on which the EU is based: the free movement of goods and services, free movement of people, the freedom of establishment, and the free movement of capital. And I think it's the freedom of establishment that is most at risk here. And businesses in the EEA, which includes, just to be clear, the EU plus Switzerland and Norway, can take advantage of passporting rights, which allows them to carry out any business in another EU state without further authorization. And that's going to be a massive part of the impact and how that is going to play out into the post-Brexit economy. And as I say, we've had limited progress on this in negotiations, and I think that does represent a big concern for businesses in that sector, given the importance to the UK economy of it. So how does that particularly impact on VAT, which is my area of specialism? At a headline level, you might think not very much. I mentioned the impact on goods and not so much on services. And in fact, that's because the principal VAT rules that govern where services take place for VAT purposes, and therefore where they are subject to VAT, so-called place of supply rules, are not going to change in the majority. So you're still going to have a rule where if you're supplying B2B services, then the VAT is due on the customer by way of a reverse charge, as it is currently. And if you're supplying businesses to private consumers, then the starting point is it's going to be where you are established, which is in the UK. There are some impacts at a niche level in certain sectors. So I mentioned the importance of the financial services sector to the UK economy, and the government has recently confirmed that it will allow businesses providing financial services to EU customers the right to recover VAT on purchases that relate to those activities, where currently they cannot. And that's going to be a massive boost for the financial services sector and an additional cost for the government, but will impact on the financial services sector. There will be some changes. So if you're hiring and movable goods, currently there are provisions that determine whether VAT is due or not by dint of whether they are used and enjoyed in the EU. And that's going to change, obviously, from the 1st of January, when all services provided outside of the UK have the same VAT treatment. Consider VAT registrations elsewhere in the EU. For example, if you are providing a service that is land related, the rules there say that that is subject to VAT in the country where the land is situated. So if you're an architect or a construction business carrying out a project in France and your customer is not VAT registered, then you would have to register for VAT in France and charge local VAT. And that will have an impact because in France, and indeed a number of EU member states, you are required to set up a fiscal representative if you are a non-EU business, as the UK will be, in order to carry out those services, and that will involve joint and several liability. So a whistle stop in the nature of this guide to the key issues surrounding the service sector and Brexit, and particularly VAT. And as the other speakers have said, more than happy to unpick this or wider VAT challenges in the discussion sessions.
Fantastic, thank you, Andy. And I think raising that important point again, that there are a lot of differences depending on your specific sector or your specific service. So businesses do need to look at their individual circumstances when preparing for Brexit. Without further ado, all that's left is to thank our speakers very much for today's discussion. So Cerys, Tim and Andy, thank you very much for giving up your time during a no doubt incredibly busy period for yourselves, as businesses across the country are grappling with what to do with the last 32 days before the end of the Brexit transition period. So a virtual round of applause for yourselves. And that's all from us today. Thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you at a future webinar.